Good morning. I am so pleased to welcome you all to the 4th Annual Sustainability Conference. And before I say just a few things, there is an entire group of folks that we need to really pay homage to for their support and their participation in this day. Primary among them are the OSU Spears School of Business, the OSU Graduate School of Environmental Science, and Sustainable Tulsa. And now I'm going to list some individuals I think who are certainly worthy of being singled out. Gary Allison, TU School of Law, Maggie Denharder, Oklahoma Policy Institute, Rob Katz, Mike Lemus, Cindy Shanks, Patty Smith, Jim Pappas from the School of Business, Spears School of Business, Jason Ahmet from the Jim Pappas School of Business, Jamie Holmes, Sarah Wagner, and I think I already mentioned Rob Katz. But I really appreciate all of the individuals who have come together to put this day together on a very important topic. Sustainability applies to almost every role that we play as human beings in this planet, and certainly as in my role as a Chief Academic Officer, it is to ensure that our curriculum evolves with the multiple needs society at large, our transfer institutions, our employers, and our community. And as Senior Vice President, ensuring that the final decisions that I make as a college, serve the college long term. It is certainly easier and simpler on a daily basis for me to make decisions for the short term. It's less traumatic, less dramatic, and makes people happier for the short term. But if you're making the hard decisions, it's about the long-term sustainability of this college and its ability to serve the community. So the notion of sustainability runs through most of what it is that we do or what we should be doing. And this day is about making sure that we can get better at that. I appreciate you all being here and hope you have a great day. And I'm about to introduce our next speaker, who in short, I was just told, is a great guy, a great family man, and he's got great hair. This is Charles Williams. He is the Vice President, Treasurer, and a Director of the Clean Air Action Corporation. Since 1976, Mr. Williams has been actively involved with solid and liquid fuels and innovative air pollution, ozone, and greenhouse gas control strategies. Since 2000, Charlie has been heading up the technical aspects of CAAC's award-winning TIST program, wherein they work with subsistence farmers in East Africa and South India to plant trees to sequester carbon. Carbon revenues fund the extensive sustainable development program for farmers, including food security, and provide them cash income. Mr. Williams has an MS in geology from Oklahoma State University, and I love the notion of trees. That is also what we do as educators. On a short-term basis, we are planting trees. And from a long-term basis, it is the shade that they will bear in which we cannot sit. So we often don't know the true impact and long-term benefit of much of what we do on a daily basis. So I'm very happy that you're taking a day to relax and to learn yourselves. Thank you very much, and welcome to the podium, Charlie. Thank you.
Well, she already said what I was going to talk about, so I guess I'm basically done. The TIST program. To start off with a little introduction, Clean Air Action Corporation, been around since '93, but it was because of working with Mayor Susan Savage here in Tulsa to help develop some ozone strategies. Tulsa was about to go into ozone non-attainment, and we started working with her and coming up with different ways for people to come into compliance cheaper, sooner, faster. One of the lists mentioned some first. One of the first things we did with her was to come up with the Tulsa Ozone Action, and which is now the Tulsa Ozone Alert Program, and it's in over 300 cities around the country. So it's a pretty good strategy. In 1998-99, guy I worked with, Ben Henneke, and his wife, they went over to Tanzania on a mission. And while they were on this mission, they were doing small group visioning with some of the subsistence farmers. And they were asking them, you know, what would they like to improve their lot? And looking around, they were seeing that there was a lot of deforestation in the area. And to understand deforestation in third world countries is to understand that trees provide the primary and generally the only fuel for their well-being. They tend to cook three meals a day, and that all has to be done with wood. Where's that wood come from? Well, it used to come from this area that you're seeing in the picture. This was once forested. And just as a little anecdote, think about it. If we as the United States did not have natural gas or oil or coal or nuclear or anything like that, and we relied solely on trees, there would not be a stick of wood left in this country. And that's true. That is true. I mean, there would just not be any at all. So they have, in an unsustainable way, deforested the lands around them. The soil's degraded because of that. The scorching hot tropical sun tends to burn out the organic matter through volatiles, and they don't use much in the way of fertilizers and stuff like that. So they've got these open fields, and they are degraded. A lot of the folks are living in a desolate area. Story about this man here is not so much the guy. Take a look at the wood pile. Take a look at the area around the wood pile and behind them. There's no trees. Okay, so in this culture, the wife would probably spend an entire week gathering this wood, walking 8 kilometers, 8 miles, getting the wood, hauling it back, stacking it, cook a couple meals in between, go out the next day, get some more wood, and they have to do the same thing with their water too. Okay, so this is tough. So what does that deforestation mean? Well, there's 32 million acres of tropical forest lost every single year, which is about the size of Great Britain. That's a lot of deforestation, and it's not sustainable. So more impacts, and they're not positive impacts. The deforestation leads to more poverty because you don't have a source of fuel. Fuel is important. I don't know, when you go home tonight and you turn on your gas stove and you turn on your heat, get in your car and turn on your engine, that's all fuel-based. And if you don't have the fuel, which these folks don't have, your quality of life goes down very, very fast. It also affects your nutrition. These people are living on less than $1 a day. $1 a day. It takes a week to buy a latte. That's the difference. Biodiversity loss, you can imagine the larger mammals in Africa living in that area if it was forested, but not so much when it's just nothing but plains. So it leads to desertification and exacerbates climate change. So we developed TIST to try and address this. We were already involved with emissions trading, and we saw that the UN was coming up with some strategies to use deforestation or reforestation to develop credits, and that could be a funding agent for a new project that could help the subsistence farmers. So The farmers plant trees, the trees grow, we measure, we monitor, we count every single one of them. We calculate how much carbon has been sequestered. We take it out to the European carbon markets and we sell it to, we're selling it to a European tea company. We're selling it to an English barrister, big organization there. They're offsetting their travel, they're offsetting their offices and things like that, and so they pay for it. And so that money that comes into the project then is used to do all sorts of sustainability training to try to address the specific needs of these small groups of farmers. And TIST itself is got this administrative backbone. We've got Palm. I think there's another slide on it, but I'll hit it now. So we're using smartphones to collect data in the field. And when we first started, it was extremely difficult to be able to get that data on smartphones, and then we had to take it to internet cafes, and then they would have to sync it up to our server here in the US, where we could then display it on our website live. So we've got real-time data coming from Africa and India. Now they can go out and they can collect the data in these remote farms and sync them right up there. And we were doing this so that in 2008 we were a Computer World Honors Laureate for our data collection system. 2008 was also the year that iPhone came out with their first, or Apple came out with their first iPhone. So that's why we got the award, because it was a little advanced compared to what other people were doing at the time. So we developed TIST. These are small groups of 6 to 12 people. We find that's the most efficient way for them to work. We are now up to 82,000 members in Tanzania, India, Uganda, and Kenya. Our largest project is in Kenya. Oops, what did I do? And we're trying to address food security, poverty, climate change, and we continue to expand using the funding that we received from the greenhouse gas sales. So how's that work? Well, basically, the farmers plant the trees, we come back in there and we measure them, we collect the data, we then aggregate it on from our database, and then we go through this excruciating report writing to take it into what we call the standards. We use the verified carbon standard and also something called climate, community, and biodiversity standard, and it's just reports after reports. It's nuts. And then the farmers, as things get profitable, they are a 70% profit share with us. So they not only get paid, we pay them for the trees, every tree that they plant, but they also will be a 70% profit share. Okay, so the small groups, they develop nurseries. And the whole idea with this is to make sure that there is zero cost of entry for them. They don't have any money, okay? And so what we've done is we've gone out and we've showed them how to collect the seeds from trees. We've showed them how to bring the trees back and develop nurseries. And then, I think we got a slide. There's some nurseries. And then they get ready to plant. And if they're successful, then the trees grow, and these are probably 3-4-year-old trees, so they're doing pretty good. And they came from, don't forget, they came from a seed. You know, they actually got to watch the process. Here's the seed going into this little poly tube that they made, or into another type of nursery, and then they, you know, get to be about that tall as seedlings, and then they transplant them. And I've got a little more on the transplanting in a little bit. And so what we're seeing is that, you know, there's some stark degradation out there, and by using the right techniques, they're able to improve their Their crop yields, the one on the left, I'll show you a better picture of that in a little bit. That's an example of the difference between using what's called conservation farming and their standard farming. And then on the right-hand side, at the bottom, are early trees. Those are like 2-year-old trees. And then these are a couple comparisons after 3 years. It's actually a church on the top left, and you can see how it greened up after they actively started planting. One of the advantages of the trees in the hot tropics is that it actually shades the ground so that it doesn't just scorch the soil and suck all the water out. And consequently, you'll actually start getting grasses growing under the trees. The bottom one is another example of 3 years. These ladies, I don't know if you can see real close, but there's some little bitty trees in the foreground, lower foreground of the bottom left picture. And then you can see what they look like 3 years later. They've actually grown up. And here's 10 years. This is in India. And you can see on the left, they're just, small little shrubby looking trees. And now after 10 years, putting some size to them, putting some mass on. Okay, so what do the farmers think about it? Well, the farmers, a good way to test is to see what the uptake by the farmers are. Because when we go out, first thing we do is once we get introduced to the community well, when we first went to Kenya, we hired some people there that wanted to be part of the program, and to be part of the program, they needed to plant trees. And so these folks now are our leadership council there, where there's only 4 of us here in the U.S., okay? Everything else is being run by the Kenyans, the Ugandans, the Indians, and the Tanzanians. And so we have tried to go ahead and give them the tools, because TIST is for them. It's really not for us. It's for them. It's to benefit them. That's why we did it. And so if the farmers don't like it, they're not going to join, because it's all voluntary. They have to plant on their own lands. Now, we're going to help them figure out what trees to plant. But they're going to plant on their own land, and so they need to make that judgment. Where do I want to plant them? How many do I want to? Do I want to displace any of my crops? What's the advantage of this one tree versus another one? And so this first slide, that little eye in the middle, that cat's eye in the middle, is Mount Kenya. And Mount Kenya is right on the equator, all right? That white stuff in the middle of it is actually snow. So you do have a glacier literally on the equator there. 17,000 feet, so it's pretty tall. The green fringe around that area is all natural forest, and it's protected. Everything else, let's see, right down below these double arrows, about an inch is where Nairobi is. So if you know anything about Kenya, it's in the middle of Kenya, and that's probably all you're going to get out of this slide. The yellow dots are the first groves that were planted. And by a grove, I mean it's a tree grove. It's a farmer's land where he started planting trees. And we've actually gone out there, counted the trees, measured the trees, done what's called baselining, determining that, what the land was before. Because if it had been forest and he cut it all down to plant our trees, it doesn't qualify in the carbon business. We don't want them cutting down trees. We want them planting more trees and learning to use them sustainably. So we start out, here's July 2005, and all these are in July. So 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I only go up to 15 on these slides. But as you can see, the uptake is pretty significant. The farmers like the project because they see what it does for them and what kind of advantage they get. And this is what our growth curve looks like worldwide. And so we're It's also an old slide. It's only 2015. Right now, we are at 11,863 small groups, 82,000 plus subsistence farmers, and 16.8 million counted trees. Counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I think you guys know how that goes. Up. Okay, so we've also been successful on the international front. I mentioned the Computer World Laureate for the monitoring system. The rest of this stuff, you're not going to know what it is unless you're in the business. And if you were, someone I was trying to sell carbon credits to, I'd show you all this stuff. But these are standards. We've been on the cutting edge of getting stuff done, and we have been successful at it. We've probably got more distinct projects in these systems than anyone else does in the entire world, and we've achieved gold level status, which is another big deal. The most important is this bottom one. According to our survey data, when we extrapolate that through the entire program, we estimate that we have provided the farmers, and this is their own self-reporting, but we've provided the farmers with over $140 million of sustainable benefit. And so that's just monetized, but that's going to be from better crops, fruit production from trees, carbon revenues that they've actually gotten, cash-wise from us, and so that makes us feel good. That makes us feel like we've really been successful. The farmers like it. The farmers are actually getting something out of it, and that's the road to sustainability in the developing world. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what's it mean to be a subsistence farmer. Well, it's kind of what you might think it is. Live in modest houses. Not something that you're going to find in Midtown. And some are nicer than this guy's house, some are not. The terrain's not always the most friendly. You're not going to get a big wheat combine out on these fields. It's just a little steep. But you can see, as you look across this little valley, you can see the houses down there, and you can see the steep grade of where their farm fields are. In the foreground, they've planted pine trees as part of the project, and that guy in the middle, he's actually what's called a verifier, and the verifiers come out and they actually review our data, and they have to determine that our data is accurate and correct and verify it in order for us to be able to make carbon credits. So, and then the other two people are quantifiers. And a quantifier goes out, and they are the ones who actually count the trees. They go out to every single grove that we've got, and they do it by species and age. And so we've got quite a database. Here's another one. Those are tis trees up on the sides of that hill, and you can see they're kind of intercropped with other crops that this is in Uganda, that the Ugandans have planted. Once again, very steep, and going out there on verification trips is always exciting, because we're having to hike up and down these hills all day long. And the Ugandans, I mean, they're doing it all the time anyway, and so they're like, chasing a jackrabbit, and it's kind of difficult, but it's good for the heart. It gets a pounding. One of the keys to being a subsistence farmer is to diversify. So what you're seeing right in the middle, that's a mango tree. If you look to the left and the right, there's some big leafed shrubs. Those are bananas. If you look at these things hanging from the mango trees, those are beehives. And if you look closer behind, let's see, over on that side, you'll see another mango tree that's starting to grow. So these guys are trying to make the most of what they've got. And so some of them have adobe homes, right? They're not all wood. It's a lot easier to make brick than it is to find wood sometimes, depending on where you are and how depleted the supply is. And so they make the bricks there on their land. And so that's a little brick making operation. Anyone ever made bricks at home? Okay. And the farms aren't always nearby. Sometimes they've got to walk half a day to get there, and so it's not worth it for them to turn around and come back home. If they get caught out in the storm, they got no shelter. So, you know, oftentimes you'll go out to some of the farms and you'll see that they've gone ahead and they've built a shelter, and they'll live out there for a week. You know, have some food, they make their own fire, and that's it. Okay, so as a tree project, one of the things that we really, really want to do is make sure that the farmers know what's out there and what benefits they have. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, one of the most important things are the fruit trees. The thing about the fruit tree is number one, it provides them with food. Yes, that's always good to have your own food supply. Two, the trees oftentimes, you know, will provide a cash crop. And if you've ever been to like East Africa and a lot of other places like that, as you drive down a highway, you will pass all these primitive kiosks that are full of, well, there's people out there selling fruit, and that's just coming right from their farms. As soon as they're ready to harvest, they bring them on out and they try and sell them out there on the highway. Oftentimes they will bring them into town, and you know they'll set up booths in town and stuff like that. But this could be an important cash crop to them. Mangoes, for us, it's a great tree because it's a heavy tree, it's a thick tree, it gets really, really big, it provides them with lots of fruit, and it provides us with lots of carbon. And they're not going to cut it down because the fruit's more valuable than the wood is. So that's another one's avocados. Avocado is actually a tree from the Americas. All right? It was introduced years ago into Africa, and it has become a mainstay fruit for them also. There's papaya, another one. Don't have a good guava picture. Banana trees. So banana trees, I'm with one of our guys out there, and we're doing a verification. And he goes, you know, you could see that grow. I go, what are you talking about? He says, yeah, you can watch a banana tree grow. And I'm going, yeah, okay, sure. He goes, watch this. He takes his machete and he hacks off the banana tree about that far from the ground. Or we go out and we're gone maybe 15 minutes, we're gone maybe 30 minutes. We come back and that banana tree, you could always already see the rings of it growing. It probably grew a quarter of an inch in that time span. So I'm going, that's different. I'd never noticed that before. Anyway, so that's the banana tree. Jackfruit. Anyone ever heard the story of Mutiny on the Bounty? Ever heard that? A couple different versions of the movies that have been out. I'm sure there's going to be a new one coming out soon, since it's been, 15 years. The Bounty was actually picking up what they call breadfruit and bringing it back to England. Breadfruit is the same thing as a jackfruit, but that's what they were bringing back. Have you ever seen them in the grocery store here? You really? Oh, no kidding. All right. I need to get out more. Orange trees. They even got orange trees over there. They got lime trees. They got all sorts of citrus trees. Macadamia. That's another classic one for us because once again, this gets to be really big, really heavy, and the nuts are very valuable. And so once again, they will keep the tree because it's more valuable than they'll ever get out of the wood. But not all of them are fruit trees. Guava, I mentioned that, and lime, olive, cashews. Then there's the neem tree. The neem tree is one of these miracle trees, kind of like the moringa, that has medicinal properties and all sorts of other uses. This was a tree from India, and there's not that many of them over there. We're planting some in Tanzania, but it didn't really catch on, although, which is too bad. We can only tell them it's a good idea, but they have to go ahead and adopt it. The grevillea, that's a pretty popular tree, and that's for fodder. And fodder is extremely important because that means they can have animals. They don't have grazing land, all right? So a lot of these people have less than a tenth, or like a tenth of a hectare of land to eke out a living, all right? So that's not much bigger than a residential house lot. And I don't mean the big ones down in Broken Arrow. I mean, talking about here in town. It's not much bigger than that, and yet they've got to go ahead and do everything they can. So that's where the diversify comes in. The fodder allows them to keep some animals, and those are extremely valuable to them also. Eucalyptus. We're not wild about the eucalyptus tree. That's got some environmental issues. It grows really, really fast, and it will suck water out of the soil. And if you've got a low water table, then you could be causing problems. Other places, it's just fine. It's just fine. It grows straight. It grows great poles. And in fact, some of our biggest competition when we got to Kenya and trying to get them not to plant it was that Kenya Power and Light was providing incentives for people to plant the eucalyptus so they could have poles. So consequently, we ended up originally with quite a few eucalyptus, and then we finally were able to get our training to catch up with them so that they were planting more and more indigenous trees, more and more fruit trees. The indigenous trees are great for biodiversity. And so we want to go with those. And then there's a Croton megalocarpellus. So that is a biodiesel source. It's a nut. It's not all that tasty. So, but someone decided to go ahead and set up a biodiesel processing plant using the Croton seeds on the east side of Mount Kenya. I don't know if it's still running right now. It looked like they were having some success last time I was out there. Okay, I mentioned this early on. If you are in the third world and you want to cook your dinner, you're going to use wood, period. Right? Now, you get into Nairobi and someone's going to have a kerosene stove or something like that. But what you're seeing here is the traditional 3-stone stove. And there it is. You can see the 2 in the front, and there is a 3rd in the back. And so basically every meal is kind of like going camping, except it's every meal 3 times a day, 7 days a week for you and your family. And so that's a lot of cooking. As you can imagine, the efficiencies of a 3-stone stove are pretty poor. Can you see where the heat might escape from? Yeah. So one of the things that we've tried to do is try to introduce more efficient cooking stoves, because can you see the back wall in this cooking hut? It's black, right? That's creosote. This woman is in this place every single day, All right. If it's nice, she'll go outside and do a 3-stone fire out there in the open air, but she's still breathing that smoke. But when they're cooking in these huts get really, really smoky, in spite of the fact that they got slits in them and air will pass through. It still gets just totally nasty. That blackness is probably in her lungs too. 4.3 million deaths per year is the estimate from the UN on mortality of women and children. It's not the guys, because the guys don't cook. But it's 4.3 million women and children dying every year around the globe from indoor cooking pollution like this. So, we have been doing training on what we call an improved clay stove. It's not really totally clay. It's more sophisticated than that, but for now, you can see down by the guy's leg, there's a banana stalk sticking out, and you can see by the hand over on that side, there's another banana stalk. These are for the flues, okay? And they keep an open hole. And what happens is I'll show you another picture. The fire goes in down by the guy's leg, the stalk will be gone, the fire's in there. There's a series of tunnels that goes through the clay that brings the hot flue gas by the 2 pans, and then it goes out the chimney. And then the chimney is supposed to vent outside the hut, okay? So it's cleaner and it's much, much more efficient, 50% more efficient. This is an outside portable clay stove because what we also found was that when it was nice, people wanted to cook outside. They didn't want to be in that hut. And so this was a more efficient burning stove. There's no chimney or anything, but the amount of wood that you use is much lower. Here's one in action. You can see the fire over there on the far side. And the hot flue gases are coming up, and she's got a 2-burner, so she's able to cook 2 of them, and then you can see the chimney that goes out. And building a chimney is kind of fun. It's pretty easy. So what you do is you start and you make a clay snake, right? Like you're in 3rd grade. And then you put it down, you make a circle out of it, and you make another snake. Work that up, work that up, work that up, work that up, and eventually you're able to, take it out the roof, or more likely to the side, because if they open up the roof, they don't really have metal flashing that they could protect it, and so it would just rain in. So that's the stove. And the nice thing about it is that it helps them achieve a sustainable wood supply. Now, we did some calculations, and 825 trees will provide a sustainable wood supply for a family of 4 using the 3-stone fire. And the green line is the amount of wood they get once they have planted. It takes a while for the trees to grow large enough, but they're allowed to use all the dead wood, they're allowed to prune, and once they get to year 9, they should have a sustainable wood supply. And that's the rest of their lives, as long as they maintain that forest that they grew. They're going to be taking dead wood, they're going to be replanting, they're going to be pruning, but that works. Now, if they use an efficient stove, they can reduce that tree count to 625. So it's like 25% less trees are needed to be sustainable. And the more efficient their stove, the less wood they need. So that's one of our goals is to have a sustainable wood supply, because we don't want them cutting down the trees. But we also recognize that they have to have wood. Okay, so they've also got some cash crops here. In case you've never seen it, here's some coffee on the vine, and that's what it looks like when they pick them. And Kenya is known for Kenya AA coffee. Trader Joe's on the left. The one on the right is a Kenya coffee company, And I just wanted to show you that one because the kahawa is Swahili for coffee. So if you're ever over there and you want a cup of kahawa, take it. Take it. It'll be good. Also tea. Now this is more of an industrial tea. There's tea factories, and this is big time landowner. I mean he's a rich guy. Just happened to be up there, and I thought it was a great picture. But the subsistence farmers look smaller. Okay, now these guys have a little bit more than that, tenth of a hectare. Some, they might have a whole hectare, and some of these, it's not all one person. These are probably multiple farmers. So they pick them by hand, tea leaf at a time. They bring them out to a distribution and collection place, and each one of those piles is owned by a farmer, and the guy will come by and give them the price and buy it from them. And so that gives them some cash crop. Honey is also another one. Once you start getting the trees and you start having some place for the bees to interact, whether or not it's just from the fruit trees or because now you're getting grasses and other things in the area, but it's no longer just dirt, you can support trees. And of course you can support bees, and of course, if you got bees, you can make honey. But transportation's always a problem. So this is a main road between, you're not going to know the place, Kabale and Kanungu. It's about a 4-hour drive, and you get about halfway down there, and you run into stuff like this, and there's really nothing you can do about it. And so if you're a farmer and you're trying to move that stuff from one place to another, even if you're just using a donkey cart, you hit something like this and you got some difficulties. So then there's conservation farming. Conservation farming is a way to do dry land farming that can increase your crop yield 2 to 10 times. More crop yield, more health, more nutrition, and that's good. You start off, you dig holes, very labor intensive, but it's worth it. You dig the holes, then you come back, you backfill it with stover, put some dung in it, and then you wait for the rainy season. When the rains start to come, then you get out there and you either plant your seedlings or you plant your maize being corn. The traditional way to do it is to cast and see what happens. On this, you take 3 corn seeds, you stick them in the hole. When the water comes, then it becomes a basin, and it holds the water. Right? It doesn't run off. It holds it. It's deep enough so that it stays moist. And because of that, you can get this differential in maize. On the left side is conservation farming. On the right side is traditional farming. And, you can see the difference. And the difference may be, 3 years of corn versus none or one. And we've got anecdotal stories that of neighbors who say, yeah, I was the only one to have any crop this year because it was a drought, and my neighbors, they got nothing. And I got not much of a crop, but I got something. And then they plant grain sorghum, potatoes, they plant their own beans. That's good because it's a legume. Squash. The animals, chickens are pretty popular, mostly for eggs. Every once in a while you get chicken, and I'm going to tell you, some of that chicken is free range, and it is tough as the sole of your shoe. And that's not an exaggeration. So they got dairy cattle. Not much beef is actually eaten. If you got a cow, it's probably going to be for dairy. These guys are digging a fish pond by hand, and so they'll fill that thing. They'll dig it out, and there's a little creek nearby that they can fill it with, and then put some tilapia in there, and you have fish. And the goat, so this little guy's probably young enough, he's going to escape for a while, but as you drive down the roads, you'll see on the side, part of the right-of-way, there'll be goats pegged into the ground, you know, on a rope leash, and eating and grazing. And that's probably one of the main meats, if not the main meat. There's a barbecue that they make called namachoma, which it's good, but it'll never compete with Elmer's. I mean, it's still tough, but most of it is in a soup. And okay, so he's not a farm animal, but this raises the human and wildlife conflict. I don't know if, can you see the little line that goes across the middle of it? That is a 13-kilometer long solar electric fence, and they put that up to try and keep the elephants away from the farms, but sometimes it doesn't work, and you know, we are always hearing stories about you know, the fence was down, the elephants came by and wiped out our entire farm crop this year. But one of the benefits, this is an old tired slide that we really need to update, but what we're trying to show here is that the benefits from fruits, nuts, stoves, woodlots, honey, conservation farming, which is all the colored stuff at the top, is especially in the early years, much better than any kind of potential carbon revenue that's out there. Part of the problem is carbon revenue is not priced at externalities, and I don't have time to go into externalities, but the benefits from the Sustainable Development Program, as I mentioned earlier, 140 million to date, and that's probably 13 years of program life, and the program's supposed to go at least 30 years. And so we expect, you know, several more hundreds of millions of dollars of value to the farmers, and that is not even high uptake. Everyone in the program is probably getting some benefit from the program, but there's very few people that really take advantage of all the different aspects of the program. It's hard to get people to do the conservation farming. When they do, they're happy they did it. But when they look at the work in front of them, they go, take my chances with the rain. So anyway, so that's the end. That's elephant dung. That's I figured you've probably never seen any before, at least walking to school in the morning. And that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, that was really incredibly action-packed in terms of the amount of information and activity you guys are involved with. We wanted to open up the floor for questions for Charlie while he's here, and hopefully you'll be available to answer any of their questions. So if anyone's got a question, please, I don't think we have a mic to pass around, but we'll try and make sure that your question is heard. So, all right, we've got one in the back.
We've actually, we actually partnered with some folks up in, I think it was Minnesota, that had a solar oven, and frankly, the folks weren't interested in it. You know, we thought it was going to be really great. We showed them how that they could start making their, like rice in the morning, and put it out and let it stay in the sun and be ready at noon. And it just was not something that they really wanted to do. It was too untraditional, which is always a hurdle. You know, we don't do that here. Yes?
You said in most places that getting the water was even an issue. So like what about irrigation systems? Like how do they water their trees? They just wait for the rainy season?
Yes. Yes. There's a few places, I mean, if they're lucky enough to have a source of water nearby, running water or wells or something like that, they will water their nurseries because they have to have a certain amount of water. But otherwise, they wait for the
They collect the rain somehow.
well, they use those conservation farming holes, and the rain will last. Oh gosh, they've been having so many droughts, but the rains go on for weeks and weeks and weeks sometimes, and there's enough for the trees to take root and start growing, and then there's usually a second rainy season that comes in, and then our summertime, the July, starts to get hot and dry, and you know they need to be. If they've got water available, they'll go out and water it, you know, when they can. But if you've got you know 2,000 trees, you're not going to water it. So its timing is everything.
Have you heard of where some people have raised bees in hives to deter the wild free-range elephants?
No.
So it's one of those, if you have a cash crop, you have the honey,
Yeah.
but the elephants are very fearful of bees.
No kidding.
Those work better than the electric fences, I've heard.
Well, I will pass that on. We have an area that really is like right in an elephant corridor, and I'd never heard that, never heard them talk about it. So maybe that's new information that could be very helpful. Thank you.
It's actually a very recent study, and this was part of that research.
Well, cool. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will pass that along. Yes.
So I saw one attempt at pest management with the elephant fence and this idea of bees for elephants as pests. Does some of the biodiversity and the integrated planting have the reason for that being some sort of pest management? Because with monocropping, you tend to have insect pest problems that are greater. Is there any integrated pest management in the plan?
Kind of. It's more passive. So we've got over 230 species that we have logged in that we use and they plant, some more than others. We encourage lots of diversity in what they select. There are areas where they do some essentially monoculture planting. The Ugandans, they plant a lot of pine trees, and it's the same species. But there are over 65,000 distinct groves that we have cataloged. And they could be, you know, neighbors right next to each other, or they could be several farms away, or they could be, you know, a quarter of a half a kilometer away. And so part of our risk mitigation is to plant lots of different varieties and have them operated by lots of different people on discrete groves. And so we occasionally have fires, but it'll just be one grove that's affected. We have monitored some of the pest issues. Really have not had any. We had one farm where We did see some stuff, but it looked like it was probably just restricted to the one tree. I mean, it's not like, it's not like the pine beetle blight or anything like that. So it's passive, but we're aware of it, and we're somewhat cautious.
I wanted to inquire about, are these indigenous trees to the area that they choose from, or are you bringing in species that are not native to the area?
Okay, so we have not introduced any new species, but many of the species planted are exotic and have been introduced and are common and have been so for 100 years. It's like the avocado. It's a great tree, but it's from the Americas. The mango is from India. The eucalyptus is from, and the grevillea are both from Australia. And there's a lot of those there. And so one of the challenges is to make sure that we can find as many indigenous trees as we can that have a value to the farmers. And so that's the key. Our indigenous population is probably only at about 10 to 15%, and we would love to see it higher, but we've not found indigenous fruit trees that are good. It's hard to find a fast-growing tree that they could use for firewood or poles. So they like to fall back to the grevillea, where they can also get some fodder out of it too. It's a tough situation. But we're also dealing with an area that has been deforested and degraded for a couple generations, and so starting where we are, they are farmlands. We're first of all having to get the trees in the ground and get the soils back to where they are, and
So do you get resistance from the indigenous people, or you're saying there's very few of them?
indigenous people. No, I'm talking trees.
People now.
Oh, well, people, there's no indigenous people in the area by the definition used by the UN. Okay, the people of Kenya are the people of Kenya. There's a couple, what they would consider indigenous tribes, but not where we are. But but they are considered the Kenyan people. So like the Kikuyu tribes, the Kmeru tribes. Okay, so I think maybe when the people came into this thing, I thought we were talking about trees, so maybe you should rephrase your question.
Who are you? Who are the decision makers in this? You come in with your program, but I mean, you're talking to whom?
Oh,
I guess that's what I mean.
we are talking directly to the farmers. Our administrative structure in country are our leadership councils, which are farmers, and every farmer makes their own decision about what to plant, where to plant, how much to plant, and how much to participate in the sustainable development programs. We have got what are called clusters. Well, first of all, we have the small groups. The small groups are supposed to meet once a week and determine what's the best thing for the small group, and how can one another help each other to get jobs done. Then we've got the clusters. The cluster meetings are within walking distance, and every small group is supposed to send a man and a woman to the meeting. They go there, they receive training. The training is done by what we call cluster servants, and those are also farmers who have been trained in all the different aspects of it, and they also are the ones who will make the payments if it's time to issue vouchers for their trees. So except for the highest level of management, which is Ben and I, I do all the technical work because I know what I'm doing, and they don't. So I do all of that, and I do that here on the computer, you know, through our database and all the information they have collected. But they do everything else. It is for them, it is by them, it is all the farmers. So they are, by UN definition, they're not considered indigenous people, but they are the people of Kenya and Tanzania and Uganda. So did that answer your question?
Could you enlighten me as to what the UN definition is of indigenous?
Yeah, so they tend to be more ancient tribes that have been restricted and live off the land. And so you hear about the indigenous tribes in like the Amazon, okay? And these are folks that people haven't seen hardly had any interaction with, but they exist in the forest, and they're a different set of peoples culturally, and they're totally isolated, and they don't interact with the rest of society. And so Kenya is, in spite of the fact that there's lots of tribes there, they are one people, one population, but for a few indigenous tribes that still live in the Mao forest. There's a small tribe there. I can't even pronounce the name, but we don't have any kind of relationship with them. But the people who are in our program are just not considered indigenous from that direction. Yeah, they're just Kenyans. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. Did you have a question?
She actually asked a question.
Yeah.
Hi. I was curious about your perspective on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals introduced by the UN, and if that's been something that's influenced you since 2015.
Funny you asked. So we set up this program long before they were thinking about these goals. But we have just finished doing a couple trial runs on the goals. We qualify for 11, we believe. There is a new standard that is coming out that is trying to make a legitimate attempt to become a standard that allows people to do the paperwork, do the study, do the analysis, submit it, have it get verified. This is going to be another one of these standards we have to deal with. But right now, we believe we qualify for 11 of them. So we're all for it because we are able to differentiate ourselves from other people because of the breadth of our program.
All right, let's thank Charlie once more. All right, before you go anywhere, let me just let you know what the program is coming up. At 10:45, we have a panel discussion